Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Metro Outer Development Assessment Panel. I declare the meeting open at 9:32 a.m. I acknowledge we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respect to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters, and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the DAP Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of the DAP regulations. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist in considering the information before them. I'd like to introduce the members that are present today. My name is Dale Page. I'm the presiding member today. In the room with me to my left, I have Eugene Coltaz as deputy presiding member and Karen Hyde as specialist member. With us online for Part B, the City of Kwinana, I have Councillor Barry Winmar and Councillor Matthew Rouse. For Part C, City of Wanneroo, we have Councillor Bronwyn Smith and Councillor Jackie Huntley. We have no apologies today and no members on leave of absence. All meeting minutes of previous meetings are available on the DAP website. Moving now to Part B, the City of Kwinana. The first item is declaration of due consideration. I will shortly be asking if panel members have considered all the information before them, but I'm mindful that within the last hour or so, some extra information has been sent through that includes correspondence from DBCA and DUA, and that has been emailed to members and has been uploaded onto the DAP website. Now, I'm mindful we may not have had time to review all of that, so I will be proposing adjourning the meeting just for 10 minutes to allow members to review that information, because after that we'll need to make a declaration that we have reviewed all the information before us. What I will also be doing during that 10 minutes is asking the City of Kwinana staff to consider, in the event that the DAP does go with the deferral motion as recommended in the report, given the recent information that has been provided, to be quite specific about what additional information they would be requiring if a deferral was passed by the DAP. So I would now like to move that we adjourn the meeting for 10 short minutes to allow members to review the recent information that has been provided. Do I have a second for that? Thank you, Member Hyde. All those in favour? Thank you. We will now pause and we will reconvene in 10 minutes to allow members time to review the info. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Thank you for your patience during that adjournment. We have both elected members with us. Yes, we do. Welcome back. Thank you. Dealing now with item 1 under Part B for the City of Kwinana, Declaration of Due Consideration. Panel members need to have considered all the information contained within Part B of the agenda and the Part B related information, noting that an R13 direction response for further information was published on the 14th of March 2025, and that some additional information was circulated this morning. Could I please confirm by a show of hands that panel members have had a chance to consider all information? Thank you. Item 2 then, disclosures of interest. No disclosures of interest have been received to this point. Do any members wish to make any declarations of interest in relation to this item? And in doing so, could I just check with our local government members whether this application has been before you at a council briefing or a council meeting?
It hasn't come to council yet, sorry.
No.
Great, thank you. Do any members wish to make any declarations of interest in relation to the item?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Moving then on to item 3, which are the Form 1 DAP applications for the City of Kwinana. 3.1 is lot 9000, number 129 Orton Road, Casuarina, an extractive industry sand, DAP number 24/02689. We have one presenter on this item today, Daniel Lewis from Element Advisory, speaking against the recommendation in the report. Daniel, you've been through this before. I remind you that in accordance with clause 482 of the DAP standing orders, your presentation is limited to 3 minutes. We've read everything that you have sent through, so I encourage you to focus on the key points you need to get across within that time frame. I will, when we get close to time, let you know that you are close to time, and then after that, panel members will be able to ask you questions. Over to you.
Thank you, Clary. You have a throw. Thank you, panel. Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to address you this morning, particularly on this item 3.1. As you said, my name is Daniel Lewis. I'm an associate at Element Advisory. As the panel is well aware, this application has been to the panel 2 times before, in October and January. Particularly, the panel met and deferred it on 2 specific grounds, namely the POS design and how that can be incorporated into the overall structure plan, and the second part being the conservation category wetland to the southwest, and potential impacts relating to hydrology. So, next slide. There we go. Just briefly, I know the panel is fully aware, some key considerations that has changed since this proposal came to the panel before. The volume has decreased on the basis that in correspondence with the City of Kwinana, the preference on the western edge was to amend the batter from a 1 in 3 to a 1 in 8, so that following extraction, the development of the western edge can be made readily available for POS. That was a discussed outcome. The other critical change the panel should be aware of is the agreement from the applicant to lift the floor of the quarry from 0.6 metres above the annual average MGL to 0.5 metres above the MGL. This is critical because effectively this results in a lifting of the base of the quarry by a metre. There's a condition regarding amended contours in there, but that's relatively straightforward in our opinion. The other aspects that the panel dealt with very briefly, noise, again, vibration is not a relevant consideration on this proposal, and we're in compliance with the noise regulations. Dust can be appropriately managed. There's a condition in the alternative recommendation for approval, and the traffic impact statement clearly shows we've got capacity within the road network to support our operations. I think what's critical for the panel to consider today is particularly the water balance modelling that's been provided by Sasha and Hi2O. Particularly from the modelling, and Sasha can talk to this in more detail if the panel has specific questions on the modelling, but there is a minor increase in recharge for the wetland, not a decrease. This is purely from the base that we stopped the modelling at the point in which POS wasn't constructed. This is just bulk earthworks, so there's increase in infiltration. That would then become, once POS is constructed, you then have vegetation and there's other modelling that needs to be done for that, which in Hyde 2O's opinion is net-net. Briefly on the planning context, there's nothing within the current planning framework that can preclude the application. However, due regard is to be given to the structure plan moving forward. We've touched on this briefly before. And I'd just like to briefly touch on the two left. The left hand is the endorsed local structure plan, and on the right is our proposed concept.
At times, I'll ask you to wrap up. Thank you.
Sure. Last couple of slides. This is the intersection. There's conditions relating to an upgrade. It's already been done, not relevant. And then these are site photos that we took on Tuesday. I think what's critical with this application is in no way, shape or form is the applicant proposing any works within the wetland buffer. The wetland mapping is accurate. It's been certified by DBCA in the last, I think it was 2021, 2022. It's the accurate boundary. It's a very clear delineation as to where the wetland is. And we're outside of that. So you can kind of see the vegetation in the background. It's a wetland, we're not touching it. So really, in our opinion, public open space has been addressed appropriately, and it just comes down to hydrology and where the panel believes our assessment and modelling is correct, and whether there's any subsoil recharge of the wetland as modelled. Hopefully that captures.
Thank you. Good summary. Can we drop away the preso? I'm going to hand now to panel members to see if there are any questions of this presenter. Councillor Winmar, questions of the presenter?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Look, thanks very much for the presentation. I think the previous deferments and the conditions have been met. However, with the recent analysis of the area, and there may be occurrence of the community of the Two Miller Springs and organic mound may be adjacent. I think that the DBCA report still needs to be done on that area to see if that's any threat on the biodiversity of that area and the ecology around that, which I think considerably alters the hydrology report around what's been submitted. And at this stage, I don't think, with the potential presence of that organic mound, I think it's important that we take into consideration the critically endangered area around the ramifications around any interruption with that spring.
Councillor, sorry to interrupt. Do you have a question at this point of the presenter? I want to make sure we capture your statement properly during the appropriate time during debate, but is there a particular question at the minute?
I just wanted to know if the proponent has considered the element that there's a spring adjacent, and there are any considerations around whether that was as part of the original report.
Thank you. Can you respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So from day one, the wetland was considered the highest category of significance, being a CCW, and hence why we've done a 50-metre buffer and separation from operations. We also met on site on Tuesday. DBCA have walked it. I think what's really pertinent in this situation is that they spent 3.5 hours on Tuesday tromping through the bush, that's DBCA, and couldn't find anything. And a lot of the advice is predicated on the basis that there may potentially be, but the evidence to date has been, particularly from DBCA, not from the applicant, is that they can't find soils are there, but they can't find a situation where the water is actually coming out of the ground, which is located further south. So irrespective of whether it is or it isn't, our proposal is giving this wetland the highest level of protection that we can afford it.
Thank you. Councillor Winmar, any other questions of this presenter at this point?
Not at this point, presiding member.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Rouse, do you have any questions of this presenter?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Other panel members, do you have questions?
Thank you, presiding member. Karen Hyde speaking. Thank you for your presentation. I just want to test you a little on that statement that you've just made that DBCA couldn't find anything. The information that we received this morning following the site visit suggests that they feel there are characteristics of a tech on site and that needs to be proved up one way or another to be characteristics of or characteristics not of. So I just want to test you on your statement that DBCA couldn't find anything during that site visit. A little bit of ambiguity there.
Yeah, sure. So I refer to the first page on the advice back from Anna, specifically DBCA, the last paragraph there, it says at this time DBCA is unable to definitively confirm the presence of the mound springs. And I think
it's restated a couple of times.
it's restated. The critical aspect is not necessarily the soil composition and the vegetation. That's all in agreement that it is a wetland. It's just the presence of the actual water coming out of the ground to trigger the TEC. So in my deputation, you would have seen evidence where they've mapped it. So Linden Mutter on the block to the south, those dots is where DBCA have viewed the water coming out of the ground. And that's where they're pinpointing the TEC location from. They've then said there may potentially be occurrences further north, but to date there's no ability to find it, and it's pretty it's densely vegetated, as in it's pretty hard to get through and to be able.
Just explained that they said to us that it's quite obvious during summer that the water's coming out of the ground.
Yeah. So in this scenario, because it's kind of a PT material, chatting with the guys on site, it actually comes out of the ground like a spring. So you can see it, like it's pretty obvious. And they walked the site, and basically in the whole site system, they couldn't find specific water coming out of the ground in summer where if it was present, you'd be able to see water coming out and it would be flowing. Like it would be obvious to see. So that's kind of where we're coming from.
All right. Secondly, then, in terms of rehab levels and recharge, and also advice that we, confirmation of advice that we've received from DWER this morning. I think the hydrology report talks about there being a minor increase in recharge to 6%. But there are questions around the validity of that statement in DWER's analysis of the hydrology report, and they suggest that there may be evaporation or other factors which may change some of those statements. Can you please comment on that?
I'm not best placed to comment on that.
You have your hydrologist here.
Sasha's online. He'll be best placed to answer that.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've just had a look through the DWER advice, and I guess in any hydrological model, you sort of adopt certain parameters that you think are representative of a particular site, and then you apply them sort of to the modelling in terms of what you see out on the site in terms of water coming out to the Water Corporation drain, which it does from the wetland, and that largely controls the water levels in the wetland sort of over the winter period as observed by aerial photography. And we calibrated our model on that basis to that extent. And we got a sort of slight increase in recharge using parameters that are sort of widely used by the Department of Water in their modelling. They've recommended using slightly different rates, and they've made the comment that may lead to a bit of additional evaporation from the site due to the depth of groundwater. At the moment, we've got a net sort of increase sort of in recharge. So if we were to adopt sort of slightly different parameters that the the Department of Water are suggesting in that regard, we're likely to get a situation where there probably wouldn't be any increase in recharge, and you'd be looking at a sort of a situation where the groundwater levels would remain the same. Typically, what we've found sort of on mining sites that we've conducted post-development monitoring on is there is sort of a slight increase in groundwater levels post-development, which would be sort of consistent with what we're coming up with a slight increase in recharge. So you don't get a slight increase in groundwater levels post-development of a mining site with a slight increase in recharge. So I don't believe that would change the outcomes of the water balance modelling and our findings. And I believe that the wetland levels are largely controlled by the Water Corporation's pipework that comes and controls those levels during winter. And so sort of on that basis, I think sort of more so than the water balance modelling outcomes itself, I think sort of the field investigations that we've conducted that shows that it's controlled by a function of the Water Corporation main drain and an outlet to its system is probably largely what defines the wetland there at the moment and its levels.
Thank you. Can I continue? The other aspect that were referenced is the sort of post-rehabilitation stage. Now, obviously, the structure plan didn't envisage excavation to this degree, and that's why there's interest in whether the post-excavation and rehabilitation levels and activities thereafter are suitable for this area. And they talk about park irrigation needing to be taken into account. Could you please comment on that?
We haven't considered public open space uses afterwards. We've done a water balance on the existing situation and what happens sort of as a result of the mining operations on the site. If it is to become POS, what will happen is there'll be a sort of an introduction of additional. We haven't, as I said, we haven't done that in the water balance, but just in general terms, what would happen is there'd be an increase in application of irrigation water, which would likely lead to further recharge in that area, and that would then sort of increase sort of recharge basically on the site again, which would probably lead to a slight increase in groundwater levels, and then the wetland would be controlled by the culvert that runs out to the Water Corporation drain. So in terms of the levels in the wetland, it wouldn't increase the levels in the wetland.
Okay, thank you. Just one more on this tech and water thing, and that's probably to you. There's a big if in some of this information that we've received from DBCA, but if I could put a hypothetical to you, if there is a TEC determined to be on site, that would obviously have a knock-on effect in terms of buffer arrangements. What would the implications of that be to the proposal to excavate?
Yeah, so I think what's really critical when it comes to TECs and buffers, I think DBCA makes a specific reference to that. They haven't actually given us advice as to buffer on the distance, and they go, it should be case by case. It's pretty standard in what we do with our clearing permits too. Basically, what's been adopted is 50 metres is the comfortable separation where DWER and DBCA have kind of come to. There's no real science around 50 or 60 or 30. They've just said 50 is the area from any critical high value wetland needs to have a 50 metre buffer from operations. And the 50 metre buffer was set in the structure plan to the wetland mapping. And in the absolute worst case scenario, which it's not present, but if it is right on the line of where the mapping finishes, we've still got a 50 metre buffer to it. So if the TEC is located hypothetically in the southwestern corner, we got a greater separation to the TEC. So in short, I don't foresee whether the TEC is in there or it's out of there, that the 50 metre is not the appropriate buffer for this wetland.
Thank you for that. Presiding member, my other questions are related to traffic and other matters, so I'm happy to go to those later if other members have got other.
No, I can go with your
All right,
questions.
okay, thank you. I read through the previous paperwork for October 24 and January 25 as well. Has the traffic impact statement been amended or updated since 2024 and it was submitted with the original application for this? The reason for my question is that there is a condition of approval and not prejudicing any discussion or decision by this panel, but there is a condition for an amended TIS, which I think in your correspondence you wanted to have deleted because you said that it had been approved, but that's not exactly my wording of the condition. I just wondered if you could advise of its status.
Yeah, so from lodgement, so it was lodged, and the updates that were made were a swept path analysis for Bombay and Horton Road. It was a swept path analysis. I don't have this, I'll pull it up in a minute, but I don't have the specific date reference in front of me. But effectively, I'll have to cross-check on that. But what's actually happened since that updated report came back and said it was fine, there's a sufficient width, capacity is fine. The suggested condition here is around a SIDRA analysis, which is obviously the peak AM, peak PM movements of an intersection, which is effectively a T intersection and has already been upgraded.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for that answer. And my last question, again, going to your correspondence on the relevance or validity of the conditions in the alternate, you requested deletion of condition 1, but in previous reporting in October, I think there was some wording around the applicant being comfortable with contributing to road upkeep. Can you?
Yes, that's two different things.
Yeah.
So the condition 1 that's suggested, that's the DCP. So that's calculated on the residential lot. I think I put a 4.8 grand a lot.
Yeah.
So we're not creating any lots. So I can't see a need or nexus for condition 1. However, correspondence and discussion that was held previously was that it's pretty standard as part of an extractive industry license that there's a road deterioration co-contribution based on a tonnage that comes out. It's pretty standard levy.
Yes, it is, and we have several operations in town of Kwinana which we pay that to, and our assumption that we'd do something similar here.
Okay, so I might defer that question to the city to seek further clarification. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you, presiding member.
Thank you. Member Coulter, has any questions of this presenter?
Well, just going back to the Cumulus Mound Springs, from here, if it's deferred, what's the process in your view that has to go through to determine whether it's there or not?
That's the problem. Like we haven't gone through the wetland. DBCA's own ecological team have gone through it and haven't found anything. Like Stephen's not prepared to send an environmental consultant through there to try and find something, whether it's there or not. It's just we're in a kind of a spin of is it not? If it is, what does it mean? It's kind of from our perspective, we wouldn't be pursuing work to try and find it.
Yeah. So my take on this, if I can speak, is it all right for me to have something?
I'm asking a question of the presenters, so you're part of that, yes.
So if you read it clearly, there's been comments from the town of Kwinana originally to say there may be a tumulus mound spring here. We've asked them to try and quantify that, and the DBCA inspection, which was only last Tuesday, was actually planned to be a little bit earlier. The intimation from the report, which you've only just received, is that even though they had an extensive trek through the bush, they couldn't actually find a tumulus mound spring. Now, my understanding is they're evident all through the year. They've guy, Joel, who was there, one of the DVCA guys, actually said, look, when you find them, it's fantastic because it's just something that's so unusual, etc. So the sheer fact they didn't find one leaves us with this intimation that, well, there might be one there. So it's pretty hard to plan for something that might or might not be there, in my view. And to me, I think that's an unreasonable outcome, or anyone can say there might be a tumulus mound spring near a wetland, and if there is, it holds up all sorts of upstream development. There's a structure plan here for adjoining housing estate, which is just to the east of this. Now, is all that going to be held up because there might be a tumulus mound spring? I don't know. I would think that's inappropriate. What I do know from what people have told me, and I'm not a hydrologist, is that if we don't change the evaporation and water balance dramatically, and we're outside of the wetland, which is on our private land, and we've offered to protect, there's been no contention that we ever want to try and dig it up or do anything with it, that the impact, whether there's a tumulus mound spring there or not, is minimal or not existent. And so I feel like this is a way to continue to defer a decision here on the basis of something that hasn't been found. And really, even if it has been found, I don't understand, and Sasha can't explain to me either why.
Sorry, can I just take you back, because we're sort of moving into a bit more of a presentation again.
Sorry.
Just to the question. So the question was, well, if it is deferred, what would be the next steps for you? And you're saying you're uncertain about that. Is that correct?
We've already done a hydrological assessment. Our hydrologist is here today and has just said, I believe if I've heard him correctly, he doesn't see that we're going to change the water balance. So I don't understand what else I would do in that case. We're not proposing a POS there of any note. It's a desire of the council, not us.
So I suppose getting back to my question is the council asked DVCA how long it will take regarding the presence or not of PEC. Will that be available? So I'm assuming that DVCA is going to go out and look again.
We don't know.
I don't know.
And they said, well, this is dependent on the availability of DVCA staff to provide the advice. Alternatively, the proponent could provide justification why they consider it's not an occurrence on the site. I'm asking, you believe that it's not an occurrence, and if it is, you're protecting it anyway. Is that correct?
Correct. That's our view.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, look, I have one quick question about something quite different. So I note the proposal doesn't meet the required separation distances of relevant EPA guidelines. I'm less concerned about the sensitive land uses to the west across the freeway because of the freeway, but could you comment on the fact that the nearest residences on the eastern side are only 226 metres away, and what you think the implications would be on them?
Yeah, so key considerations from the separation distance is dust and noise. Dust is prevailing winds are from the easterly direction, which is the other way towards the freeway. So dust is the other way, notwithstanding the dust management plan that's been submitted is what Urban Resources use across all their sites, particularly resi sites, which are adjacent to houses. And there's actions within there that if there's any visible dust, actions like hydro mulch, you can spray it down, wet it down, can all be managed. So we're very comfortable that the dust can be managed appropriately. Regarding noise, the uniqueness of this site is that the noise contours across the site are actually from the freeway are greater to the dwellings, are greater than what our operations would be. So we need to comply with the decibel reading of 45 or less. Our modelling shows 43 with the noise regs. However, the actual ambient noise levels are sitting a lot higher than that just by the freeway. So we're very confident that with a we have to abide by the noise regulations in any event and action that according to the acoustic report. So we're very confident that we can comply with the noise regs. And as it stands, the acoustic modelling is higher for those residential dwellings because of the freeway at the moment, so we're not impacting amenity. That's.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I might move then on to the local government offices.
Sorry, member, can I just ask one question? Thank you. And it's to Sasha. And again, without prejudicing anything that comes out of this, but one of the conditions of the alternate for approval is for a detailed water management plan, which I presume you might be responsible for, should this be approved. I'm assuming that the hydrology work that you've done so far hasn't been peer reviewed, but you could confirm that for me. But would it be normal to have a peer review of the water management plan to give greater satisfaction to the city and Department of Water and Department of Biodiversity?
I think Stephen might be better to answer that one than myself, because typically we don't do the water management plans for the sites that Stephen has. But our reporting generally informs those plans. So the baseline hydrological investigations, the groundwater level, this sort of work with the hydrological water balance will all influence the water management plan. But the water management plans tends more to be how it would be managed during that construction and operations period. And my understanding is most of those plans would be submitted to agencies for their endorsement or their approval or acceptance. So that would essentially form the peer review process of that work.
Yeah. Okay. Did you have anything further to add?
The only comment I'd make is that we're talking about a very simple sand excavation, stripping of topsoil, removal of sand in very deep sand. So the water management plans generally relate around, are you doing anything that will contaminate the water? Are you doing anything that will cause erosion, etc.? So these are very benign operations. They have multiple sites of a similar nature across Perth and several in the town of Kwinana, with no issues to my knowledge. So in direct answer, is it peer reviewed? I don't think so, but there's multiple cases of these similar operations operating without incident in Kwinana, Coburn, Rockingham, all of these shires.
Okay, that's all right. Thank you for that.
I think it's the water management plan. It's an odd thing to ask for. It's normally a dust, noise, and maybe.
That's there too. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry to be too wordy then.
Okay, we're going to move now to the local government offices. We've got a number of officers with us today. We have Twinkle Makwana, Asha Logan, Brett Camel, Ruben Ganesha, and Rebecca Rosa with us online. I'm going to open now for panel members to ask questions of the officers. At the end of those questions, City of Kwinana, if there's anything you wish to add within a few short minutes, I will allow you to do that. But I think we'll see whether or not we can cover off on the questions first. Councillor Winmar, do you have any questions of the Kwinana officers?
No questions at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rouse, any questions of the officers?
Nothing from me at the moment, thank you.
Okay. Members in the room, Member Hyde, any questions of the officers?
Thank you, presiding member. Do you feel, on what we've heard this morning, that the proposal can be or is through the alternate adequately conditioned for approval, and that it could proceed on the basis of what we've heard this morning and the various conditions associated with water management, rehabilitation, etc.? Or do you feel that there might need to be some other check and balance prior to commencement of works?
Thank you for the question. In short, No. We feel that there's key environmental matters that still need to be properly investigated and understood and clarified that may or may not impact the proposal. I'd like to just sort of make the point that we have, like the applicants have demonstrated a lot of work, and I feel like the city and the applicant have been working constructively since the original deferral in October. But as these environmental values matters have arisen and been brought to the surface, I suppose, it's clear that they're quite significant and need to be properly understood before the city would be in a position to support the proposal. So in short, no, I don't think the conditions at this point would be sufficient to address all the concerns.
Thank you. Second question to you. One of the reasons that you put forward for deferral was to continue assessing the public open space design, but can you explain to me what more needs to be done, what more needs to be reviewed? It's been with you a while.
And if I may, just so you can provide one answer, can you just, in responding to that, do you need additional information from the applicant about this, or do you just need more time to consider the information you've already got?
The additional information will assist. One of the points that was made by the applicant and is in one of the conditions is to raise the ground level or the finished level of the excavation, which is not currently shown on the POS or on the development plans. That's something that needs to be considered. The main point, though, is the second reason for referral and how that will potentially influence or impact on the POS design. We still don't understand entirely the environmental matters and the how the hydrology affects that, and then how does that then influence the POS?
So can I just question you on that? You're saying that pardon me, you're saying they linked that the environmental implications of this proposal might have implications on the design of your POS, and therefore you're using that as a reason for deferral. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they're not two separate issues. They will be linked, and I think that's reflected in the DWER comments around the need for irrigation and the management of nutrient, possible infiltration into the groundwater. Look, certainly the POS landscape design has been provided, and the changes in terms of the battering and accessibility have made us more comfortable with that land being left in a state that's consistent with the ultimate purpose under the structure plan. But we're not at a point, because of the outstanding environmental values and also just a little bit more time to assess it properly. We can't at this point confirm that we're happy with it.
So just on that, can I confirm that it's really therefore that second reason of deferral about the environmental values that is the sticking point here, because the design of the POS is not something you need to land on now, is it? So it's really about the environmental values, and then the POS is something for you to consider in the future. Is that correct or not?
Yes, though the land is covered by a structure plan, and there is still an element of uncertainty around who will eventually deliver the POS and what mechanisms are available to do that. So there still is a little bit of consideration to consider, but taking your point, the second point really is the primary reason that the city has for recommending the deferral.
Thank you very
Sorry,
much.
can I just ask a question? It's regarding the POS. Now, this is just an option plan, isn't it, for the POS? This isn't the final design. Is that correct?
Yes. So it's a concept plan, and that concept plan will be able to deliver the final outcome of the structure plan, as Brett said, because it's driven by the structure plan, and who we're going to take over this project with capacity to improve and make upscale of the POS. So this is the basis. So it's pretty much, if the levels were compromised, then achieving the final outcome would be a problem for the city or the proponent at a later stage.
But the proponent for the sand excavation has shown this POS concept design, and you're happy with the concept?
Yes, we're happy with the concept, but not the levels at the moment. So,
because you're not sure about the levels and the hydrology, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. One of the questions I put to the applicant just now was in relation to condition 1 of the alternate that you provided to approve. Hopefully you were listening to that conversation. Could you please clarify what the intention of condition 1 is, and whether it is still relevant or needed to be worded differently? The applicant seemed to imply that it was similar to what they regularly do, provide a contribution to some remediation of roads should they be, the truck movements damage the roads, rather than a DCP contribution for future subdivision works, which this is obviously not an application for. Could you please confirm the purpose of condition 1?
Yeah, certainly. Well, as you know, there's a structure plan approved for the area, and there's also a developer contribution plan adopted and part of the scheme for the area. Well, there's actually 2. So one of them is DCA 10, which the applicant has mentioned, and that is for a community infrastructure contribution. That contribution is collected on a per lot basis. As this application is not proposing any residential lots, there wouldn't be a DCP 10 contribution liable for this development. So that one's, there's no liability there. However, with DCP 3, that's our contribution plan for standard infrastructure. So that's for road upgrades in the area, contributions to coincidentally public open space, land acquisition and improvements, and some other land acquisition for community infrastructure or community spaces. Under the scheme, it's quite clear that the liability for a DCP contribution occurs at a certain, either 4 or 5 trigger points. One of the trigger points being works being undertaken on land within the DCP area. So that doesn't have any sort of, there's no like need nexus kind of consideration there. The scheme is quite explicit in that if works are being undertaken on land within the DCP area, the liability is triggered and the contribution is therefore required. So we need to apply that condition 1 to reflect what the scheme says. We do encounter this situation quite often within the city. There'll be, for example, super lot sort of subdivision proposals, or which is another trigger for the contribution, or other sort of bulk earthworks type of instances. And the way we administer it is that the condition, we still recommend the condition be applied, and that we enter an agreement with the landowner to defer the actual payment of the contribution to a later stage, and that usually will align with when the residential subdivision occurs.
Yeah, okay, thank you. But this condition is not worded in that way. And my understanding of DCPs is that there's clarity around the need and nexus. So Should we get to a point where we're actually considering this alternate, I might seek some further wording from you in the way that condition might be worded, which makes it more explicit for what contributions you're seeking relative to the development application. Just a last question, if I may. There's also a condition in there requesting a new TI or an amended traffic impact statement. And it mentions some SIDRA analysis. What are you information are you seeking to gain from that? Or do you feel at this point that there is sufficient information from the previous TIS submitted with this application?
So the previous TIS, and as you said, they asked for a SIDRA analysis is mainly to understand, because it's the development itself about Thomas Road and Orton Road. And Orton Road, it's currently heavily used because Bombay Boulevard currently terminated at the Thomas Road end. So, and Thomas Road is frequently a primary distributor road. So there's some incidents happens during the peak hours, cause accidents, because some of the expansion of the dual carriageway haven't continued for the Thomas Road for the east, further west. So that makes, in terms of the capacity wise during AM and PM from the operational point of view, to understand intersection performance. But in terms of the numbers what they have provided, and we had some internal discussions, as pointed out by the planning consultant from the applicant side, the intersection itself is upgraded by the city. The real purpose is that the land developer on the eastern side, supposed to be developing the intersection, but due to timelines, then city ended up doing the upgrade to accommodate a slightly larger vehicle. So what we ended up is recommending some, if is this approved, pretty much like a haulage management plan, which will incorporate, to identify the safety of the intersection, that will include a traffic management plan throughout the operation lifetime of the excavation. The haulage management plan would say number of trucks being used in operations, and same as the implications such as the truck reg numbers or anything for records, because the extractive industry license only covers moreover operational cost, but it doesn't cover any other incidents or damages to our infrastructure. So from a traffic perspective, the TIS, whatever information is provided, the trip generation is specified in the report. We're happy to incorporate a new condition, which is a haulage management plan, which identify the safety of the operation.
Okay, so would that be an alternate to 14? Could 14 go and a haulage management plan replace it? Is that what you're saying?
Can I suggest we
Sorry.
Okay.
No.
Sorry, back to the city. Are you suggesting that you no longer need a TIS, but you need a haulage management plan?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. Thank you.
Sorry,
Any more questions?
Yeah, I'll have a quick. What have you asked for haulage management plans in the past? Do you think the proponent would know what it is?
We're happy to give some guidance when they coming in discussion on that one. So it's a haulage management plan. Pretty much it's indicate the haulage route. Definitely they will be accessing Orton Road or Market Street through Bombay Boulevard. And plus the number of trucks will be utilized and their numbers that will be kept in confidentially, and the staging program that will tie into a traffic management plan. So traffic management plan, it's depend on the intersection performance, because currently after upgrading that intersection, we have some visual surveillance for larger trucks, because the larger trucks has caused a significant deterioration on the Market Street and Bombay Boulevard intersection. So that will track the vehicle numbers. So it will enable us to report larger vehicles being obtained. Then we'll report to main roads through the RAV process, HVS service. Otherwise, be able to track the vehicle numbers, and we have to discuss any of the further damages caused for the new upgrade.
And you say that the license attracts a fee?
Yes, the extractive license is a separate matter, which is a general procedure, which is an extractive license, which is generally who extract minerals within the city of Kwinana. Definitely, they have to lodge an application over the period of time, the lifetime of the extraction. So it's an yearly basis fee. It's based on tonnage per number of trips. But it mainly would cover more like an operational matters. The incidental damages wouldn't be covered by the extractive license.
I'm just wondering whether the license fee contributes to road repair as well.
It's the cost which is charged over there is significantly minimum over the 5 years. That's the restriction on that one, because the per year charge, I can't pull the figures at this stage, but the range from $5,000 to $7,000 depend on the tonnage. And generally, to set up a traffic management plan lately for that kind of intersection was cost us $8,000 to just for a minor repair, based on the traffic flow. Because currently, as I said, Bombay Boulevard got terminated at Thomas Road, so we have to shut some of the flows as well. So that's why we're asking some kind of if this approved in any case, then we need to negotiate with the proponent to see how we can move forward through the haulage management plan.
Okay, and you're saying that will cover the cost of damage.
Correct.
Assuming you could identify who created that damage.
We currently upgrade the intersection to withhold all the heavy vehicles, but it's depend on the driver's behavior. And assuming it's less than 90-meter trucks would be utilized for these operations. In any case, imagine there's another industry also operating near vicinity. So we want to keep it separate, who caused the damage which. So we have informed them as well through this process, the intersection being upgraded, intersection being monitored for heavy vehicles. So everyone aware of this issue.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what you mean by how you'd sort of identify and charge somebody when there's all sorts of trucks going through there, but
it's based on the vehicle number plate recognition.
Is there cameras there, I presume?
Yes, currently because of these damages, we forced ourselves to put a camera.
Okay, all right. Well, that's something that perhaps they'll have to deal with. Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant?
I have a couple of quick ones. Has Dura responded yet to, not of the applicant, of the officers, has Dura responded yet to the amended memorandum from the acoustic consultant?
No, they haven't.
No? Okay. Couple of questions about the mechanics of the deferral. If the DAP were to agree to another deferral, are you sure 90 days would be enough time to provide all the info required and get all the uncertainties ironed out? Is 90 days going to be enough, or are we going to find ourselves in a situation like this again where we need to consider another deferral?
I might just, sorry, I'll just follow that up and say you're relying on DBCA to perform to get your information. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
We
would
given
welcome
that you've specified 90 days, are you comfortable that that'll be enough? Given that uncertainty that the member is referring to.
No, since the report was submitted, we've received that advice from DBCA yesterday, which indicates what they haven't committed to a time frame to provide the report on the organic mountain springs. So we would welcome a greater time, certainly.
Okay.
So 90
I think
days.
just
Greater than
90 days.
Sorry, you said greater than 90 days.
Yes. Yeah. Just thinking the process through how this could play out from here is if it was to be deferred. I think the first point is to receive the DBCA report. That would then need to be referred to the applicant for them to review and consider the implications of that. Updated information would then need to be submitted back to the city, referred again to DBCA for comment, and then the assessment completed. So I don't think that will be able to be done in 90 days, as this current sort of deferral period has proven. We'd suggest a longer period, even up to 180 days.
6 months.
Thank you for that. So earlier in the meeting, when I adjourned the meeting for 10 minutes for us to review the information that had come in, I had asked you to go and use that time to consider being more specific about if the DAP decides to defer this again, exactly what information do you need from the applicant to be able to take this forward with DBCA and to do your internal assessment? Have you come up with some specifics that we can use?
Yes, we have. Am I able to refer to the suggested wording that you provided? Yes. Look, I think that covers the process. It's more so rather than it
can I just pause you for a second? Can I pause you for a second? So just for the benefit of everyone else that's involved here, the city is to consider being specific. My own take on what I see from the report is missing has been provided to the city, and that's what they're referring to. Do you want to read out those queries that the DAP Secretariat sent through? And they are by no means something that I'm suggesting as an amendment. It's just you are to come back with some specifics. Does this cover them or not? Do you want to read them out for the benefit of everybody involved, please?
Try and get them up on the screen, Jen.
If we can screen share, that would be fine. Thank you.
Sorry, are you going to screen share? So
yes.
Yeah.
Give us a second. And I guess just to qualify, those are just thoughts, but I would appreciate the city's view on what you need. That bottom paragraph's another dot point. So there's 4 dot points there. Is that everything you need to be able to move this forward, or is there something missing, or is there something unnecessary in that list?
Yeah, so the first line, deferral for a maximum period of 80 days to allow the following work, no issues there, we agree with that. The first dot point, a formal survey to determine the presence of cumulus springs, that could be or receiving advice from DBCA on the presence of cumulus springs. Okay, so if we were to say to receive advice from DBCA on the, so delete a formal survey.
Sorry, which part did you want me to please repeat that, Dale? Which part?
So to that first dot point, delete a formal survey to determine, and replace that with receive advice from DBCA on.
Can I just ask a question about the conditions, because they do reflect?
Let's work through them, and then I will ask you to comment on them.
Okay.
I can't have you jumping in.
Can I just ask a question of the council? In the request for information from DBCA, council said, what is your process now to prepare your report? on the site visit yesterday. Do you think that the site visit they undertook is the advice that you're going to get?
Yeah.
In other words, the response from DBCA says, yes, we will draft a report of yesterday's site visit. It didn't say when or how long that'll take. But is that what you're asking them, the report on their site visit? Because they did a survey. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Or do they have to go out again and look further?
No, sorry, it's Rebecca Rosa speaking. They don't need to go back out on site. The site visit the other day looked at the vegetation communities and the presence of the peat and considered the moisture on the site. And what will happen now is that this is my understanding of the process, obviously not working for DBCA, but in order to formally confirm that it's the TEC, some hydrological data or information is required, and that's the final stage of the process in confirming whether or not that site is the TEC. But obviously from the site visit the other day, we've got the plant assemblages and the peat and the community is consistent with the identification of that TEC.
Okay, but the other thing that they said was alternative, the proponent could provide justification for why they consider there is not an occurrence. And the proponent saying, well, there is an occurrence, you can see it.
So can I just, if it's the DAP's view, if this is an alternate, the DAP's view that we don't ask for that report and the DAP feels that what the applicant's saying is adequate, then that can be. So I'm asking now the City of Kwinana to put forward wording if they were to be more specific about their deferral. Okay. So is that advice to receive advice from DBCA? Let's just be absolutely clear. That is to close out on the visit that they've done this week. That is, rather than just an email, they're going to send you some formal advice to close out the site visit already done. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding from the discussion the other day.
Okay, I'll let you keep going.
Okay. So the second point would be assessment of potential direct and indirect impacts on the TC by the proposal. Would that be by the proponent?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so that word.
We're okay with that. Yeah.
Proponent. Point instead of proposal, proponent. Yep. Keep going.
And then the third point, just requested that DBCA be expanded to include and D work.
Okay, and that's the work that you're already waiting for, is that correct? So that's not asking for something new. That's the work that you're saying you should receive by the 28th of March, is that correct?
No, that would potentially be, well, that is that work, but it could potentially be new assessment based on point 2.
Yep. And continue.
Commentary. And we don't have we agree with the fourth point, commentary on the potential impacts of nearby residential uses to the east. So that would cover that. Updated, is it noise assessment? We've talked about noise assessment, yeah.
Yeah, because that's not actually covered off in the RAR at the minute, so that's an uncertainty. Is there anything that if the DAP were inclined to move this as an amendment to the recommendation you've put forward, is there anything else you want to put in there? The reason I'm asking is we can't have this bouncing back and forth each time and introducing something new each time. So the applicant would need certainty that if those boxes are ticked, that a decision will be made on this.
To the conditions. Because that's a condition.
They need 80 days to do that.
6 months.
Yeah. This is just the deferral conditions.
Okay. Yeah. No, we're okay with that. That's fine.
Okay. Do any of the members in the room before we're not moving anything formal here, is there anything missing from there that we might want to pop in there before we ask the applicant to comment on this? Any members online wish to comment on this just for the minute? We're not in formal debate, but is there anything glaringly missing from this list?
No, that's fine by me.
Okay. All right. The applicant, I'm going to give you an opportunity to just comment on if this was to be deferred, because it's the current deferral, is the recommendation in the report, but it's ambiguous about what needs to happen. Do you wish to comment on that before we start to consider this item?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of aspects to this which provide a lot of uncertainty for the applicant, particularly the 180 days. I think it is disappointing in how this application has come, and particularly the advice from Dwyer. If I just note that the city had it on Monday, we haven't seen it till today. We don't have any triggers in here. And then basically the city's just standing there handballing it to DBCA, who are then saying, well, I need hydrologist advice. So they're handballing it to Dwyer, and it's a big circle. And that's how it's been happening for the last 6 months. So I don't have any confidence that we're going to be back here in 180 days with any of this advice in writing, with a clear recommendation in the RAR.
And I would endorse that, Daniel. It has been some time. The intimation of their inspection is quite unsure that there's anything there. It's like to me, it's just what Daniel said. It can go on forever. You know, we didn't find one this time. We've got no time frame from DBCA on when they'll even submit a report on their visit. Though their anecdotal comments are, we didn't find anything. We've got a peat and we've got topography there, somewhat created by an artificial drain. Which I don't see the DBCA considering at all, that if the freeway hadn't been built and main roads hadn't created a block here, this would not even be considered a particularly valuable wetland. So it's an unnatural interference. So I personally can't see how a tumulus spring could even...
So understanding that, we're not talking to that at the minute. I'm asking you to comment, which you have, on the implications of this. And I sense your frustration about the back and forth, but just focusing on that, if this was to get passed, do you wish to add any comments on any of those issues before I put this to the panel to consider?
I'd just like to ask if the council wants those conditions to be met, that within the 180 days, there needs to be some interim timeframes, because there's no point getting the DBCA report the day before the next hearing.
Just hang on. So particularly the last presiding member, commentary on potential impacts on nearby residential uses to the east because of reduced separation distances.
That is, can I just clarify, that was just raised as an issue in the responsible authority report, but there was no commentary around that. So that is simply, when this comes back, if it comes back, there just needs to be additional commentary. You've provided some verbally in this meeting. It just needs to be factored in.
From the city, commentary from the city.
Yeah. So this deferral, if it's passed, is to allow us. We're asking that we would want that extra stuff. So we would need the city to actually embellish on what they've said in the current RAR and actually deal with that as an issue. They've raised it as an issue, but not actually dealt with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, sorry, presiding member, maybe the fourth dot point shouldn't be a dot point, given that the intro to the dot points is submitted to the City of Kwinana. So the fourth one should just be a separate sentence.
That's fine. We can move it as such if we choose to. Okay. Can we get the panel back on the screen, please? All right. I'm mindful we have asked a lot of questions and there's been a lot of information moved around. City of Kwinana, we've asked you a lot of questions, and I did commit that I'd give you a couple of minutes to wrap up if there was anything you weren't asked that you'd like to contribute at this point. Is there anything you wish to add?
Yeah, sure. I'll just hand over to our environmental coordinator of environmental planning, Rebecca, to just make a couple of comments on the spring.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. I think the main point that the city would like to provide is that the wetland is one thing and the spring is something totally different. So yes, we understand that there's a wetland on the site, but the spring is quite separate to the wetland that's on the site. So they're both there. We're 99% confident, I guess, that they're both there. And the spring is, the TEC of the spring is actually the community and the assemblages, the floristic assemblages and the peat presence of the, like around a spring. So it's not just the point where the water is bubbling up from the ground, it's actually the community that's created by this hydraulic pressure that pushes the groundwater through to the surface. The mound is created by the peat depositing and the vegetation growing, and then you've got certain species of plants and animals that inhabit that area. So I would say we're fairly confident that the spring will be shown to be on that site. We have seen that there's a spring to the south, and that this site is likely an extension of that community, which is the TEC. So to focus, I guess, on where the water is bubbling out of the ground is incorrect in terms of what the TEC actually is and what it means. And we've got 22 hectares of this spring on the Swan Coastal Plain. It's what's left on the entire globe of the planet. We need to make sure that we get this right, and that's why we're just asking for this additional information from DBCA to confirm yes or no it is there, so that we can properly accommodate development on that site to retain and protect that community. So we're certainly not against any development on that site, but it's just making sure that what development does occur is considerate of the environmental attributes of that site.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for that clarification. Okay, I think it's time that we move to the responsible authority report before us. We've got a recommendation from the City of Kwinana to defer the application for 90 days to allow them to further review the impact on the POS and to allow the environmental issues to be worked through. And that is the recommendation that the DAP's being asked to consider. And I seek a mover and seconder for the recommendations in the report.
The RAR.
Thank you. Moved Councillor Winmar. Do I have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Rouse. Councillor Winmar, over to you. Do you wish to speak to that motion?
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Member. The motion provides a bit more clarity, a bit more certainty about whether or not there may or may not be one, the TEC is possible. And I think that I would also like to consider that an amendment to the 90 days to be 180, which was recommended by the city, as an alternative motion.
Thank you. Can I just, does the seconder wish to accept that as an amendment at this stage, or do you want to deal with that during debate?
No, I would accept that as an amendment. Thank you.
All right. I think then speak to that as the primary motion at this point, and we will deal with that as we go through, or do we need to vote on that at the minute?
You can do it with the agreement of the mover and seconder if you're happy with that.
That's okay. Keep going, Councillor Winmar. You can keep talking to that motion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Presiding Member. Taking into account the comments reiterating the city's position, it's not a case of saying no to the development, but it's definitely a case of all the considerations with as much information as we can include in the DBCA report, and enabling us as a city to be able to ensure that if there isn't present, that we can put protective measures in place for the developer to consider around their proposal when they put that in, that they've got mitigating measures in there that also look at when they do the hydrology planning, what that looks like and what the water management plan is going to look like to minimise the impact on the TEC, and also taking into consideration the city's position that the wetlands and the TEC are both separate, and their south rising spring is the likelihood that have been connected through that area. We want to ensure that's protected and conserved and managed in the plan when the developer submits their proposal. And I'm happy to for the presiding member to consider and go ahead with the motion for the 180 days, so that we can be more informed and provide more decision and a clearer way forward for the applicant to then proceed in light of those conditions that we've outlined in our proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Rouse, as seconder, would you like to speak to the motion with the proposed amendment as suggested?
Yes, thank you. First, I'd like to just thank the proponent for the working with the city and agreeing to amend the plans to previous concerns regarding the bettering of the BOS and lifting the ground floor levels. However, with the potential discovery of the Tumulus Mound Springs on site, there's definitely further need, I feel, to defer this application. Panel can be fully aware of the impacts of this excavation will have on a threatened ecological community. I can agree that there is indeed a shortage of sand required by the building industry, but I can't agree that this is so urgent that this application needs to be approved now without having due regard to environmental reports and approvals. There was a bit of hearsay from the presenters regarding comments made to them from the DBCA, so I can't really take those into consideration. And because the response from the DBCA states that they are unable to definitively confirm the presence of the TEC Mound Springs, but further analysis of the available information is required. So the proponent's water balance modelling fails to fall short in providing important information pertaining to the possible spring. Before considering the application, it is important that the assessment reports and approvals are received from DBCA and DWER, reviewed by the city, and the proponent has any further information received. Responses received today from DBCA and DWER do merit another deferral. Preservation of the environment is one of the highest priorities for the city of Kwinana. Our council and our residents are based on potential environmental impacts on the spring. I'm not comfortable at this stage to support a motion to approve. If this motion to defer is not carried, so I will be supporting the motion to defer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Do any other members wish to speak to this motion with the proposed amendment included?
I'd like to speak against the motion, please, presiding member. I've looked at a number of reports and listened to the arguments for and against. I think that deferring this application for a further 180 days, it already having been deferred for a considerable period of time, is not necessarily going to bring the matter to a conclusion. And furthermore, when I look at the wording of the alternate to approve, which the city kindly provided under the Regulation 13 request, I find a number of aspects which this deferral hopes to identify and confirm to actually be placed in the onus of the applicant through the conditions of approval. For example, the changes of ground level through the excavation plan to 0.5 rather than 0.6 is covered through condition 2. Condition 10 covers matters to be confirmed through a detailed management plan, including matters pre and post development for the conservation character of wetland, but B, investigations of critically endangered tumulus man spring floristic community. And if the panel were minded, I'm sure that that B could be bolstered by some of the wording that DBCA provided in their communication that we received this morning to justify that there is no tumulus man spring floristic community as per the opportunity that DBCA brought forward. Furthermore, condition 11 talks to a satisfactory rehabilitation plan, which again takes account of the hydrological balance and the wetland. Condition 2 requires a wetland management plan. 13 requires a wildlife protection management plan, which again covers a number of the fauna, pardon me, that are within this area and reliant upon that wetland. 16 talks to dust, which again deals with any contra-contamination, and the area is fenced through condition 17, and there is adequate buffer provided through condition 18. I did challenge the wording of condition 1, and we did have a suggestion as to the alternate wording for condition 14 to clarify that to a haulage management plan. I find that a number of these management plans requested actually provide satisfactory checks and balances for the environmental values that are existent, and also for those that may be existing on the site, which is still be demonstrated. But what it actually does is place the onus and action with the proponent to demonstrate that the works that they propose through this application do not have unwarranted or significant impact on those environmental values. So I would be comfortable to support an approval and will not be voting for a deferral.
Thank you, Member Hyde.
Yes, look, I mirror the comments that Member Hyde has said. This application has been deferred twice for several months. It's a wonder that DBCA and, well, it's no wonder that DBCA and WER haven't provided definitive advice at this stage, because they don't have the sort of statutory time limit on them to do so. In fact, this application could be acted on as an appeal, but as a deemed refusal already, should the applicants choose to do so. And another 180 days, I mean, we're talking 6 months, not 180 days. It's a long time in the scheme of things. The work that's been done to date, I think the applicants will have to justify their proposal and the environmental impact. It's clear in the conditions that have been proposed. The other thing is that DBCA has already done a site assessment, and that report that comes through can be used and acted upon, including the hydrological advice. They've still got that commitment that they will provide it, but they just haven't given a time frame. So perhaps they can be asked for that advice either by the proponent or by the city. As a result, I think that there's enough checks and balances in the conditions that have been proposed, and that I'll be supporting an alternative recommendation to approve with conditions.
Thank you. Look, my view on this is sort of sits somewhere in between. I think even though this matter has been deferred twice already, I'm inclined to support a deferral one more time to ensure this panel has all the necessary information we need before we make a decision to approve. But I do agree that 180 days for those things that are listed that we discussed a little bit earlier is too long. And even 90 days doesn't mean that 90 days needs to be taken all of that time. So look, I'm less concerned about the potential future impact on the future of the site for POS, which is the city's reason one for deferral. I may not understand all the technical issues in relation to that, but the POS is yet to be properly designed. And I don't feel that this interim use will preclude or unduly prejudice the future use of the POS. Might just impact the design or the cost of implementation, and it sounds like that is pretty far down the track anyway. I'd like to get feedback from DBCA and DUA on the hydrology assessment that's due by the end of this month, and whether they feel that the hydrological regime that supports the TECs present in the wetlands. And I understand that yesterday's site visit has not been conclusive, even though nothing was found. So I would like to have that advice formalised and sent by DBCA, and I would like the city to put pressure on DBCA and DUA to respond to these things as soon as possible, because I suggest that perhaps when this report comes back, whether that advice has been received or not, it would be unreasonable to keep hanging around and wait for this incremental advice. I do think we need to be specific about exactly what information needs to be provided, and without that, I think it does provide for the back and the forth and the uncertainty and the moving feast that this has become. So, whilst I don't support the maximum period of 180 days, and I would be recommending that we stick with 90 as a maximum, I would suggest that we should add in those 4 dot points so that there is less scope for new things to be introduced and for back and forth. Next time a report comes back, those 4 things need to be ticked off with or without the advice of DBCA or DUA, and I would suggest it would be timely to make a decision yes or no, rather than let's go back and have another look. So in saying that, I'm not generally comfortable with deferrals. I think in this case, though, I just have some discomfort about this TEC, and I would just like to have those other reports, the hydrology report and the assessment, the advice formalised from DBCA received before I'd be comfortable to agree with an approval. I do take the points made by the other members in the room that there is a lot in those conditions that would lock down some of the concerns, but I just feel that they don't go all the way to dealing with this issue of the TECs, which may or may not be present on the site. So given that, given we have a recommendation on the table now with a suggested amendment to 180 days, we'll be voting on that with that proposed amendment. I would also like to suggest an amendment to include those 4 dot points that we saw earlier into the deferral for consideration, just so that it's a little bit tighter. I might do that as a formal amendment at this stage, and if that amendment is carried, then we will proceed with the amended deferral with the 180-day timeframe. Do I have a seconder for inclusion of those 4 dot points into a potential deferral motion? Thank you, Councillor Rouse. I don't wish to speak any more to that particular amendment to add those dot points. Do you, Councillor Rouse?
Sorry, no, thank you.
Just to clarify, was that in replacing the reasons that are already there?
Yes. Does any other member wish to speak to the proposed amendment to add those dot points into the deferral before we vote on the deferral?
Just a clarification, you're adding that in, but are the other panel members happy to go back to 90 days?
Yes, thank you for flagging that. I propose to amend back to 90 days and including those 4 dot points. Councillor Rouse, do you agree with that amendment back to 90 days as well?
Yes, presiding member.
So that's the amendment on the
Councillor
table.
Winmar as well.
Sorry?
Councillor Winmar.
Well, I'm moving it as a formal
Oh,
amendment.
okay.
So that is the amendment that's on the table now. We've got a primary motion for deferral as per the city's suggestion. The formal amendment I'm proposing is 90 days and inclusion of those dot points, and Councillor Rouse has agreed to second that. Is there any discussion or debate on that proposed amendment to the motion that we have before us at the minute? Could I then ask all those in favour of that amendment to the primary motion as we are considering at the minute? All those in favour? Carried unanimously. That is therefore now the primary amendment on the table to be considered. The other members have spoken, a couple against and a couple for. We're not able to go back and speak to that at the minute, but Councillor Winmar, as mover of the primary motion, would you like to close?
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Member. Agree with the alternative motion as you proposed. I think it's imperative that for us to be able to get some clarity around some decision making so that we can finalise this matter with that information on hand. I think it'll provide panel members with more clarity and enable the city to be able to follow up with DUA and DBCA, that there is a timeline in place for us to be able to get that information forward so that we can make an informed decision. And also echoing Councillor Rouse's comments around taking into consideration the priority around the area and what that looks like. I agree and accept your amended proposal and agree in favour.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rouse, do you have a question?
No.
Okay, you've just got your hand raised. All right, we need to put this to the vote now, and I just need to remind you, we are voting on the primary motion to defer as amended. So all those in favour? That is 3 against. Member Hyde and Member Coltaz. Thank you very much. So that motion is carried. Moving then on to item 4, Form 2 DAP applications, there are none. Item 5, Section 1 DAP considerations, there are none. With that, I'd like to thank Councillor Winmar and Councillor Rouse, our members from Kwinana, for their attendance and participation. And we move on to Part C of the agenda, the City.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Member.
The members that I have left in the room, we need to deal with Wanneroo now because we've swapped panels. Let's go. Part C, Wanneroo. So for this part of the agenda, I'd like to welcome Councillor Smith and Councillor Huntley from the City of Wanneroo to the panel. Councillors, before we get into this part of the agenda, we've been going for a little while. I'm going to move to a procedural motion to take a 2-minute comfort break for the members that are stuck in this room. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Member Hyde. All those in favour? Thank you, carried. We will be back in 2 minutes.
To go on these roads.
All right.
They've got cameras.
Welcome back to the meeting, everybody, and thank you for your patience. And we have Councillor Smith and Councillor Huntley with us online. Panel members, for the City of Wanneroo, all panel members need to have considered all the documentation contained within Part C. Do we have Do we have Councillor Huntley?
I've just asked her to turn her camera on.
There we go. Panel members need to have considered all the documentation contained within Part C of the agenda and the Part C related information. Could I please confirm by a show of hands that members have considered all information? Thank you. Disclosures of interest. No disclosures have been received to this point. Do any members wish to make any declarations of interest in relation to this section of the agenda? Councillor Huntley.
Yes, thank you, Presiding Member. I have just found out this morning, my daughter's actually purchasing a house over in Eglinton. And so I did actually ask her today what the street address was. And I have realised that it's actually in that street. So I do need to make a declaration of impartiality on this. So
Councillor Huntley.
with regard to
Keep going.
Yeah, with regard to item DAP 24028006, I disclose that my daughter is actually building a home on that area with her partner. As a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected, and I declare that I will consider the matter on its merits and vote accordingly.
Councillor Huntley, how close does your daughter live to this? I'm just mindful the street can be a long thing. So is your daughter's place near this site?
I think she's about she's fairly far away. I think she's about 5 homes away. So I'm not actually quite sure of the door number, but she is.
Oh, that's
she's
okay. We don't.
from it.
All right.
So it's your call because it's not.
Councillor Huntley, I understand you've raised this as an impartiality interest, but it probably does have implications for your daughter, given she's making a financial investment in close proximity to the site. Are you comfortable this is just an impartiality interest or an indirect financial interest?
No, this is definitely just an impartiality. It's I can't actually live. It could happen at any point. So no, and it certainly is not going to affect my judgment on this.
All right. Well, given your daughter is not a direct neighbour of the development and given your interest received, I'm happy to let you participate in the item. And thank you for raising the interest. Are there any other disclosures in relation to any of the items in Part C? No? Okay. Let's move then on to Form 1 DAP applications. Item 3.1, Lot 692 and 800 Amesbury Loop Butler Warehouse Storage Development. We don't have any presentations for this item, but Gianni Derui from Maya Circle is available from the applicant team to answer questions if we need any answers. Are there any questions of the applicant? Councillor Smith, do you have any questions of the applicant? Go ahead.
Thank you, Presiding Chair. I was just wondering, for the car parking bays and the types of delivery vehicles and supply vehicles coming to collect, are they going to be longer vehicles than your normal average car park?
No, not vehicles coming to collect. So it's generally utility vehicles and vans. And the larger vehicles are for the drop-offs.
So larger vehicles for drop-off?
For drop-offs, and they've got the turning movement to drive into the warehouse and drop the product. And then collections, usually utilities and vans.
Okay, no worries.
Yep.
Second question.
Yep.
I was just wondering, with the area that the building's located, was there any preventative considerations made to try and reduce potential graffiti attacks? Because I think you're close to the freeway in that instance, which is a hotspot for graffiti and things like that. So just wondering if any crime prevention design principles or anything like that that was factored into the design.
I guess not into the building design as such. I mean, we haven't got to the detailed specification, but as part of that, there would be an anti-graffiti coating generally applied to the building. I haven't spoken to the operator, but I wouldn't be surprised if they'd have CCTV installed as part of security fit out. But beyond that, there's nothing been specifically discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Huntley, any questions of the applicant? No? No, okay. Any members in the room, any questions of the applicant?
Just a quick one. Just comparing swept paths and landscape plans. It's a fairly sort of close and tight little manoeuvring area there next to the landscape bed. So are you comfortable that there's adequate turning movement and that landscape as proposed can be satisfactorily maintained?
We're pretty comfortable, and TransCore have prepared the turning movement, so we'd rely on their expertise. So yeah, we're comfortable.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yourself from the applicant?
No questions.
No, thank you. I also don't have any. So we can then move on to inviting questions of the local government officers. We've got Kira Slim and Nick DeVetchis. I hope I pronounced that okay. With us today from the city of Wanneroo. Do we have them online? Just start that video. There they are. Hi to the City of Wanneroo officers. Councillor Smith, do you have any questions of the city officers?
I guess if just allowing them the opportunity if they would like to share anything. Is that okay as a broad question?
Sure. What I'll do is once we've asked them questions, I'll give them a couple of minutes just to sum up anything we haven't captured. Anything else, Councillor Smith?
No, thank you.
Councillor Huntley, any questions of the city officers?
No, not at this stage, presiding member. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from members in the room?
Just the same one that I asked before. Thank you. You've had a look at the overlay of the plans of swept paths and landscape. You're satisfied that there's room for everything?
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
Questions from yourself? Just a couple of questions from me quickly. Condition 13 requires the applicant to take adequate measures to minimise dust and sand drift. Although there's a corresponding advice note that embellishes on this, would you want us to add wording that needs to be to your satisfaction?
I mean, we can do that. Would make the condition, I guess, a little bit easier to manage should that issue arise.
Okay. In relation to that advice note, it appears you might have duplicated it because the issue pops up in advice notes 1 and 3, and they're very similar.
Yeah, it's duplicated.
Would you like us to delete one, and if so, which one?
I would suggest that if we were to delete one, we would delete advice note number 1.
Delete 1. Okie dokes. And then just a question on parking. So you've included pretty sound justification in the report as to why the parking shortfall is acceptable based on the needs of the proposed tenant. What would occur if the tenant changed in the future and the business model was slightly different and then that created a higher demand for parking?
The site it depends. It depends if the land use that is proposed going forward requires development approval. There is a list of land uses, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but a range of permitted uses and discretionary uses that could move into this site. And under the regulations wouldn't be required to satisfy the parking standards of the city scheme. We would probably see that most uses moving into this sort of development would be one of those. However, if the application did require planning approval, then we would assess the application on its merits again to see if it could satisfy parking standards.
Thank you for that. That's the end of the questions. Do you, in line with Councillor Smith's request, do you have anything that you wish to add briefly, City of Wanneroo officers?
No, only to touch on the comment made earlier about the graffiti. We do have a condition at condition 17, which requires the external surfaces of the building to be covered with anti-graffiti, or any graffiti to be removed, sorry, within 7 days. That I guess is satisfactory for us to handle any, I guess, graffiti that could be offensive or be requested to be removed.
Thank you. Okay, given there are no more questions, we might move to the report then. And we have a recommendation to approve subject to a number of conditions. Do I have a mover for the recommendation in the report? Karen Hyde, do I have a seconder? Councillor Huntley, thank you. Karen Hyde, would you like to speak to the primary?
Thank you, presiding member. I'm happy to support this application with the conditions of approval. It's a P use within the light industry area. I have no concerns with the parking provision. I'm comfortable to apply the level of discretion that is requested. It's a nominal shortfall for this type of use. The signage I believe to be proportionate to the built form again and acceptable. There's adequate landscape and there are various conditions requiring ongoing maintenance and management of the area. As warehouses go, it's a good looking warehouse, so I'm comfortable to support this and have no amending motions to propose myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Huntley, a seconder. Do you wish to speak to the motion? We can't hear you, unfortunately.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. I think because I'm running on a generator, we've got no power today. It's just might be a little bit slow.
All good.
So yeah, I support this, mirror the comments as well, and yeah, the conditions of approval are fine. So I'm happy to support this motion. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak for or against the motion? No. I would then very briefly speak to it. Before I speak to the primary motion, I'd like to propose a couple of very minor amendments as per the questions I raised. I'd like to amend condition 13 to add the words "to the city's satisfaction" at the end of the condition, and I'd like to delete corresponding advice note 1. And the reason being, seconded by Karen Hyde, thank you. The reason being, although the advice notes outline what requirements need to be considered, it's appropriate to make the action to the city's satisfaction to ensure there's no uncertainty or disagreement as to whether the condition is being complied with. And deletion of advice, the advice note removes a duplicated advice note. Karen, you wish to speak?
I concur with all of that.
Oh, good. Does anyone else wish to speak for or against that amendment? No. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Reverting to the primary motion, I'm happy to support the recommendation for approval. It's a straightforward proposal for a permitted land use, meets the requirements of the planning framework and aligns with the scale, character and intensity of other developments in the area. There is a bit of a parking shortfall, but I accept the analysis and justification provided in the RA and the explanation provided by the officers earlier about how the situation would be managed if the tenants were to change in future. Very minor shortfall of landscaping on the site, but I'm comfortable that this is more than compensated for by the generous landscape areas provided in the trees within them. So happy to support. Member Hyde, as mover, would you like to close?
Thank you, presiding member. I think it's generally a quality development and it's very good to see continued investment and take up of industrial land in Wanneroo, and hope that this continues to support employment for local people in the area.
Thank you for that. All right, let's put the recommendation to a vote then. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 3.2, lot 260, number 2 Burke Way, Eglinton, childcare premises, DAP number 24/02806. We have 3 presenters on this item today: Isabel Howe from Planning Solutions, Scott Lambie from PTG Consulting, and Benjamin Farrell from Gabriel's Hearn Farrell. They'll be presenting as a team, and I've therefore agreed to give them 5 minutes to make their presentation. They'll be speaking against the recommendation in the report. Presenters, I remind you that you are limited to your 5 minutes, and I will call time closer to the end of time. Over.
Presiding member, and good morning to our panel members, local government officers from the City of Wanneroo, and observers joining us today. My name is Isabel Howe. I am speaking on behalf of the applicant. We are a senior planner from Planning Solutions. We are speaking in support of the proposed development for a childcare centre at 2 Burke Way in Eglinton. I'm joined by my colleague Ross Underwood, as well as Benjamin Farrell from Gabriel Hearn Farrell Online, from Scott Lambie from PTG Consulting, and we also have Chris Murr from Aspire on behalf of the landowner, who's also signed in. They will be assisting me in responding to any questions from the panel today. Despite the recommendation for refusal, the reasons raised by the city's RAR are extremely minor. These issues have been shown as extremely minor. The RAR is highly supportive. It shows that the planning matters of land use, bushfire, design review, parking, traffic, and waste management are all supported. The city has included 2 reasons for refusal. These reasons respectively can be addressed through conditions of approval, as shown through the agenda recommendation. I will address these in turn. Initially, the city claims it cannot approve proposed development due to a lack of landowner's consent for the acoustic boundary wall on the adjoining residential lot. This is due to a conflict with their local fencing law. The city has not raised any other concerns with this acoustic treatment or the development plans. The DAP training manual, Making Good Planning Decisions, sections 4.2.1.2, shows that consideration of separate legislation is not a relevant planning consideration and should not be a consideration when providing planning approval. There is a separate process for matters to do with dividing fences, under the Dividing Fences Act, for obtaining consent to amend a boundary fence, and for a process through the Magistrates Court to address disagreements between parties. There's not appropriate to include these considerations in this proposal process. No part of the structure is actually located on the adjoining lot. It's on the boundary on our lot. It cannot be the intent of the planning framework to require neighbouring landowner consent for development that is up to or on a site boundary. Further, our client has been in contact with the neighbouring lot and has actually obtained agreement for this acoustic wall. So they're in agreement to it, they're happy for it. We will continue this dialogue and obtain the consent as necessary through the Dividing Fences Act processes. The second issue raised by the city is regarding pedestrian access from the lot boundary into the site building. So respectfully, our position is that the development is compliant with the requirements of the city's local planning policy 2.3. The current local planning policy 2.3 requires pedestrian access within the site to be provided from the parking area to the entrance of the building and link into the existing or future neighbourhood pedestrian or cycle networks. Our site plan shows a new link along the Burke Way frontage from Eglinton Way pedestrian path all the way to our crossover, and then the movement path is through the car park in accordance with existing childcare centres and the Australian standards. Vehicles and pedestrian movements are expected to be shared in this area. It's only 30 metres long. It's 30 metres, there's clear sight lines. Vehicles are going to be moving slowly. They're going to anticipate that there's going to be shared pedestrian areas in that space. This is typical for small scale car parks on commercial premises and is shown in our provided examples per our presentation summary. There are no Australian standards that require a completely separate pedestrian path for car parks of this size. Notwithstanding, we are willing to provide some line marking on the site to show pedestrian priority along the southern boundary of the car parking so that we can provide that safe priority space for pedestrians as required. This could be applied to a suitably worded condition of approval. For these reasons, we respectfully request that the panel approve the application today in accordance with the alternative recommendation provided in the city's RAR, attachment 13. with the removal of condition 6. Condition 6 requires an updated acoustic report due to the requirement to modify that acoustic wall. As previously stated, the acoustic wall does not require movement, it doesn't need to be modified, and thus there is no trigger to require an updated acoustic report. For these reasons, we respectfully request that the panel accept and approve the development in accordance with the alternative conditions, subject to deletion of condition 6. The project team and I would be pleased to answer any questions from the panel regarding the proposed development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good time on the presentation. Councillor Smith, do you have any questions of the applicant?
Thank you. My first question is in regards to, there was mention of agreement for the fence. Is that verbal or written?
We have both verbal and written agreements. It's through an email chain that we have with the neighbour. The landowner has been in contact with that neighbour and has an email chain confirming their consent.
Okay, so and just in terms of, I guess, requirements, does then that need to be lodged through the city or in terms of satisfying that?
Yes, my understanding is that that would be provided to the city. We provide that verbal and that written consent through to the city. We only obtained this consent earlier this week. It was only on Tuesday, so it was past the deadline for submitting anything to you as the DAP, but we have actually obtained it and it can be done through the standard processes of the Dividing Fences Act.
Okay. More questions, if I may?
Go ahead, councillor.
Thank you. I was just wondering, I think I couldn't quite tell, but are there any trees that are planned to be planted in the outdoor play area for the kids?
Yes, there are a total of 11 trees proposed to be planted in the landscaping areas across the site. There's a total of 20% landscape site proposed.
Okay. And when I originally read it, I don't know if I was incorrect in this, is the grass on the outside, is that going to be synthetic or real?
I believe that'll be real. When it's subject to the landscape plan.
Okay. That is all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Smith. Councillor Huntley, do you have any questions of the applicant team?
Yes, I do. I have a question. Now, the reasons for refusal was on point 1 was the height of the fence needed to be 2.6 metres. The application is for a 1.8 metre fence. Is the fence going to be raised at all, or is there just agreement with the applicant and the neighbour now to leave the fence height at 1.8?
So the fence proposed for the neighbouring site is going to be 2 metres from their ground level. So that will be the total height. This was proposed to ensure that we exceed or match the 1.8 required acoustic wall, and then manage to have clearance for anybody that needs to pass under the acoustic awning that will be going across the back of the site. So 1.8 is fairly short for some of our taller people who might be 6 foot, and we've given that space to make sure they can go through. Yep, as Ross is waving there next to me going, hi, I'm over 6 foot. Be fine for me, I'm only 5 foot, but that's not going to be so easy. So we are making sure that we have that space for ease of movement on our side while still only having a 2 metre high acoustic wall on the residential boundary side.
Okay. So your fence then is higher than the neighbours just because the land base is higher? Is that correct?
Yes, the land base is the proposed development has got a change in the levels. So the acoustic wall will be proposed as a retaining for their site as well as the acoustic.
Okay, so if you went to a 2.6 metre fence, you're talking probably what, 3 metres between you and the next neighbour's fence? Is that what you're saying? It will be extremely high?
So the fence itself is only going to be about 2.4 metres, I believe, from our natural ground level at our site. It's the awning that is going to go up higher and actually go over, which won't actually be on the boundary. It's well and truly in our site. It's cantilevered into our site and up.
Right. Okay. Yeah, got that. And the other question I was going to ask, so you're saying, so on the alternative conditions, if we were to approve alternative conditions, you're saying that you'd like to remove 6, which is the revised acoustic report. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Yeah, no further questions. Thank you.
Members in the room, any questions of the applicant?
Yes, please. Thank you for your presentation. Staying on the matter of the fence has a gutter on top of it, according to your sections, and obviously it's sloping inward to the childcare site. How is it proposed to maintain that and collect leaf litter and ensure that drains appropriately?
That would be.
Can you do that from your side or from the childcare side?
I believe so. I might defer to Ben as our acoustic consultant on management for that.
Well, yeah, I guess basically the width of that awning would allow you, if someone can put a ladder up, reach over and, well, with a broom or some sort of Bunnings purchase to clear out those leaves. Yeah, obviously you want some drainage because you don't want the water just to run down the fence and start eroding the retaining wall. So yeah, it should be manageable.
What's the dimension of the sloping bit?
I believe let me just, it's 1200 millimeters, so 1.2 meters.
Long arms.
Oh yeah, with an
extension.
With an extension, yeah.
Oh, all right. I might come back to that. And the RAR also talks to landscape, which is a little underdone, and suggesting that a minimum of 8% soft landscaping on site and verge landscaping be approved. What's your understanding of the verge landscaping?
So my understanding is that we've actually exceeded the 8% on site, so there was only around 22% landscaping provided, is my reading. With the verge landscaping, we haven't actually proposed anything at this time that I'm aware of. Our landscaping plan is entirely fixed within the site, noting that the recent subdivision has already provided for a pedestrian path and the areas for any sort of verge landscaping that might be there on the site per the existing subdivision approval.
Right, but in terms of landscaping, you're talking about the synthetic turf materials.
There will be a mix of synthetic and natural, so any of the natural stuff would be not included in the 24.
Yes, so I'll check those areas with the city. I'll leave that for now. Thank you.
Any questions of the applicant?
I think you've answered that in regard to the consent of the adjoining landowner. Yeah, no, that's fine.
Just on that issue, what caused the delay in securing neighbour consent?
So these areas only recently been subdivided, so there's nobody actually living on site. They're still developing. They've literally put the slab down in the last week or so. So when we were first doing this approval, it was very much just the lots. There was nothing there. So we had to go through the subdivider in order to get contact details for them. Not next door and go, can we discuss this? So that was the delay.
Okay, so it's not that it was a specific objection initially from the landowner, it was the inability to contact. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Right. That's probably it from me. We might now move to inviting questions of the local government officers, and with us today we have Ming Wei Chung, Rhiannon McQuillan and Nick DeVetchis from the City of Wanneroo. We will ask them questions and then we'll give them a couple of minutes to sum up at the end if there's something that they want to close out with. Councillor Smith, any questions of the city officers on this item?
Yes, thank you. So having the update about the fence, so if we have a condition that it's coming in writing, does that satisfy the city in terms of that fence, or is there concern still about the height?
No, there's no more concern about the height. The fence is no longer an issue for the city since receiving the consent. The issue originally basically stems from the fact that we would be recommending that that apply a condition for the recommendations of the acoustic report to be adhered to and implemented. The issue that we had was that relied on a third-party approval for the fence to be altered. and we saw that as an ultra vires approval, ultra vires condition. So we weren't comfortable applying that condition in that regard. So we weren't satisfied the application could satisfy the acoustic requirements. However, since receiving the advice from the applicant, they kindly sent that through to us around a week ago. We're satisfied they'll be able to satisfy that. So.
Can I confirm then that you would be happy for recommendation 6 in the alternate conditions to be removed then?
We would be satisfied with it being modified so that the recommendations of the acoustic report could be still implemented.
Sorry, you cut out there for a second. You want it to stay?
Just a modified condition requiring that the approved acoustic report be adhered to.
Okay. I'll just take note.
We did sort of modify the condition, provided this was the outcome. If you would like some wording.
Yeah, I think that would be great in the future. My next questions, would you like to respond in return in terms of the verge landscaping and the proponent's response?
The application does propose more than the required 8% landscaping. The city's satisfied with that. It just didn't have basically just didn't have the detail that we normally require, being plant density and whatnot, and also didn't show any landscaping on the verge. But we have a condition requiring that a revised landscaping be submitted, just showing that information, and I think that would tie that up.
Okay. And do you have any response in regards to their response about with the internal pedestrian access, that there's no Australian standards that require that?
Sure. So the standard for the pedestrian path comes from our local planning policy. I understand that the applicant has stated that they don't believe that that means it requires a separate pedestrian path. However, it's the city's view that it does require a separate pedestrian path, separate to the car parking area. The city is trying to avoid a situation where we have, I guess, parents and kids walking behind cars, and we would like to see a separate pedestrian path to ensure that doesn't happen. This was also a recommendation of our design review panel. So we've recommended that happen. However, if the panel is of the view to approve the application, then we would agree with the applicant that a condition be placed on the approval, which would require at least line marking in the car parking area.
Is that reflected in your alternate conditions? What number?
It's not reflected in alternate conditions. However, I believe it is reflected in the notes provided by the applicant.
Okay, so we would need to make that as a condition though. Yeah.
Anything else, Councillor Lee?
I am good, thank you.
I might just follow on before we move to Councillor Huntley on the response you've provided to the segregated path. If a segregated path was to be provided, where would it need to be provided to satisfy the city? Just mindful, there's parking on the northern side of the car park and on the southern side. Would there need to be 2 segregated paths to avoid people moving through the car parking area?
I mean, look, ideally, if we had a design that would, I guess, fully satisfy the city, there would be a pathway that would be close to, or at least run along most of the parking base, so someone could divert to that footpath rather than having to walk through the car park at all. However, in this instance, what we're really talking about is a connection between the footpath on the street through to the entry of the building. So allow anyone arriving from site external to the car park to be able to safely navigate their way to the entrance.
So just to test that a little bit, given the size of the car park, in your view, what is the likelihood of someone coming off the footpath and navigating to the front door behind the cars on a dedicated footpath versus just walking through the car park as the easiest line of sight or path of access? Have you got any comments on that?
I don't have the numbers on how many people would be arriving on site from a pedestrian point of view, arriving on site from a vehicular point of view. I guess a good portion of the vehicles would be arriving on site 50% of the car park is pretty close to the actual entrance. But we would, I guess, like to see at least pedestrians that are arriving on site external to the site to be able to navigate their way to the entrance. It's an outcome the city recommends for all of our childcare centres, especially since 2019 when our council voted to include the provision in the policy. So that would be ideal for the city. I don't have the exact numbers though, that could split up between which pedestrians would be arriving on site versus the vehicular arrivals.
All good, thank you. Councillor Huntley, do you have any questions of the city officers?
The perimeter fence that's going to go around. Obviously, this whole building is on the end of a street. Is that fencing all on flat land, or is it undulated because the land rises or falls? So,
just so that I'm clear, are you referring to the fence with the acoustic treatments that we were discussing previously?
no, not the black one for where it ajuts the neighbours, but the actually coming round the corners. So basically off the street behind, the road that it runs on, and then as it turns into Bourke, is it Bourke Way? Bourke Way. So you've got like a whole crescent of perimeter
fencing
around the building and around the car park.
Yeah, I believe that the fencing would be flat at the top and would run along, I guess, a relatively flat natural ground level with some retaining underneath it, which would, I guess, keep it pretty level.
Right. So it's actually on the ground level. In that respect, if where the car park is, so I'm just trying to clarify this pathway. Where the car park is, if you use verge, you're going to be asked to do 8% of verge landscaping. If you put hedging around there, surely that will stop people just walking straight across the car park because it won't be open.
I guess what we're more concerned about is the pedestrians that use the proposed pedestrian linkage from along Bourke Way to the crossover, entering the site through the car park in that respect, because that is the only pedestrian access afforded to them.
Okay, so that really is the access, isn't it? It's the actual place where the cars are driving into.
That's correct.
So at the moment, you're expecting everybody to actually drive in there and walk just into that access. So you would be happy with a pathway to one side of that, one or the other?
The difficulty, I guess, for the applicant in this regard is that if they had to provide a footpath, let's say down the side of the staff car parking area or between the staff bays and the other bays, reduce the 6 metre aisle width that they require. And I think that's the difficulty in them providing that pedestrian path. It would require somewhat of a redesign for them to achieve that. Which is, I believe, why that they've recommended that a condition be applied for line marking through the car park instead.
Yeah. Would you be happy with line markings? Because
the city would be more happy with line markings than no line markings, but I think ultimately we would have preferred to have seen a dedicated footpath connection.
Yeah. Use it, they'll go the shortest route regardless. Okay, all right. Thank you for that.
Can I just follow up on that issue? If we're looking at potentially line marking along the southern side of the car park to designate an area for pedestrians, is it correct that line marking then would run along the back of the staff car parking? Is that correct?
No, it wouldn't. The staff car parking is I guess against the outdoor play area. if the line marking was proposed, I would assume that it would run behind bays 11 to 25, so that we could take advantage of the shared bay.
Okay. Thank you.
Just got a question. I mean, shopping centre car parks, school car parks for staff, pedestrians walk through those, and there's far more parking available in those areas without dedicated paths. I'd find that if you marked a 1 metre or 1.5 metre line abutting the car parks, it'd probably be more unsafe than having pedestrians walk down the middle of the access way, the manoeuvring space. Otherwise, they'll be basically on the bumper of the cars that are reversing, and perhaps that could create a little bit more problem from a safety point of view.
Can we ask that question of, I'd like to, sorry, City of Wanneroo, I might just ask PTG Consulting what their views are on that before we hand back to you.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And certainly in a lot of shopping centres, there are no designated footpaths associated with the car parks. You see people pushing their trolleys to load things into the back of their boots, etc. But, I mean, what the city said was not incorrect. However, on the plan, we've identified staff parking for the very sort of inward bays for the tandem bays, because obviously you don't want visitors parking in those bays and then getting blocked in by another car. However, staff are likely to also park in the other bays, because with the 16 staff, they need more than the bays that have been marked for staff parking. So as far as the parking management of the site is concerned, staff would likely park in the majority of the bays adjacent to the aisle as well. And given that most of the staff would arrive on site prior to the parents dropping their children off, those vehicles are unlikely to have any sort of noticeable turnover while pedestrians may be coming in and out of the site. And that is why we suggested that if a line marked path of travel was to be provided, that would be the location that it would be put, because the amount of vehicles coming in and out of in that portion of the car park would be very much low.
Thank you. Councillor Huntley, any other questions for the staff?
Have no forward ability to get from the road to those bays. They've actually still got to drive through the front, and those bays will get cut off then, the double bays.
Could you repeat that? We missed the first bit of your question, unfortunately.
So the bays that are in tandem on the diagram that we've got, so behind each other, there is no formal way of anybody driving across a verge into those bays. They've still got to come through the front access or the walkway access, and then those bays will be cut off. And you're actually saying that that's an ideal place to put a pathway because, well, one, the cars can't get out anyway, but even so, once the forward cars are in there, those bays are cut off.
No, yeah. Sorry, was that?
Sorry, Councillor Huntley, is your question of the consultant or of the city staff?
Well, it's of the city staff, because are they aware that those bays technically may not be able to be utilised, especially if someone parks in the bay more forward?
So from the city's point of view, the staff car parking bays are generally, and this is I guess standard practice for childcare centres, where they provide staff parking on the inside of tandem bays, because they won't need leaving during the periods of drop off. I guess if we provided a pedestrian path, and this would be, I guess, good for the presenters to talk to as well, but if we provided a dedicated line marking for pedestrians, then we could potentially play with the staff parking arrangements to allow for an uninterrupted path of travel for the pedestrians, or at least as much as we could help it.
Thank you. Anything else, councillor Huntley?
Thank you, Ben. Oh, the only other question I was going to ask, obviously on the alternative, I did notice you've dropped the 7 days from the graffiti removal. And I was going to ask this, sorry, is the city happy with that? And also, is my understanding then from the city, has this actually met the approval requirement? Would you prefer us to do the amended version, or are we going to amend or presiding member, I probably need to ask you that, to amend the actual refusal? How are we going to do this now? Because by the sounds of it, the city are in agreement.
So what we're going to do is we are going to, once we're done with questions of the city, we are going to make a decision on the recommendation in the report, which is for refusal. If that motion is lost, then we will move to the alternate recommendation for approval.
Great. So oh no, don't worry. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Any questions?
Thank you, presiding member. Karen Hyde speaking. To the city, just in terms of the alternate and condition 6, am I right in thinking that you're suggesting that the amendments that we could make to that would include deleting that first sentence and in the remaining sentence replacing the word updated with approved? And I'd like to ask a further question. Does there need to be something in there about ongoing maintenance or implemented thereafter? Because this is just talking about to comply prior to the commencement of the use rather than throughout the operation of the use.
To answer your first question, yes, I think that the first sentence would need to be removed. Updated would need to be replaced with approved. We'd ideally also like prepared by and then the acoustic consultant's name and then the date as well, so that we were specific in our reference to the acoustic assessment. We could add wording to the effect of and maintained in perpetuity to the satisfaction of the city also.
All right. Lot for me to write down, would have been handy if that had been in there, but that's okay. I have a second question, if I may. Given that we've had some discussion now around the proposal to mark a pedestrian route, and you would have seen the applicant in their submission to us suggest, and I'm assuming prior to occupation, that a marked pedestrian route through the car park to create greater legibility between the public footpath and the building entrance should be implemented and thereafter maintained to the satisfaction of the city. Wording to that effect, or did you have more specific wording given the discussion that we've just had?
We would prefer that an amended site plan be submitted prior to the lodgement of a building permit, demonstrating pedestrian access, and then we can use their wording from there to the satisfaction of the city.
Okay, thank you. And would you normally have a condition for an operational management plan for childcare centres, or do you feel that one is required? Do you see value in those?
It is sometimes applied. I guess if the acoustic report requires there to be, I guess, staff parking to be in a certain arrangement, children to be in or outside of play areas at a certain times. The operational management plan doesn't need to be extensive, but at least to make sure that the assumptions of the assessment are, I guess, maintained throughout the development operation.
Assumptions of what? Sorry, you just wobbled a bit there.
Sorry, so for instance, if an operational management plan might cover staff car parking arrangements, making sure that staff are parking in the proper car parking areas. Children are not outside prior to 7 a.m. And whatnot, although that can be covered by the acoustic condition also.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll leave it there. Thank you. Okay, any questions from
No
you?
further questions. Thanks.
My questions have all been answered. Councillor Smith? We can't hear you.
Sorry, I just wanted to get absolute clarity from, I guess, administration now. If with all the new information that's been updated, read the fence and things like that, would they have still recommended to refuse, or would it have been to approve with conditions?
Certainly the first reason for refusal wouldn't exist, given that we now are comfortable with the fact that the acoustic measures can be satisfied. The second reason for refusal being the footpath. It's still the city's preference that a dedicated footpath is provided. However, as discussed earlier, we would, if we were presented with a site plan that demonstrated that safe access could be provided through line marking and appropriate staff access or staff parking, then we could potentially move to recommend support for the application.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think if we move now to the report, and we need to make it clear that we are dealing with the recommendation in the report before us, which is for refusal for those two key reasons. We need to deal with that recommendation. Can I seek a mover and seconder for the recommendation for refusal in the responsible authority report? Moved, Councillor Smith. Do I have a seconder? No. All right, that motion is lost due to lack of a seconder. I therefore recommend we move to the alternate recommendation for approval. Do I have a mover for that alternate? Moved, Councillor Huntley. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Member Colthouse. Councillor Huntley, do you wish to speak to the motion for approval?
What we've discussed will meet the requirements for the city. I do think we are going to need to have a look at the
Sorry, Councillor Huntley, we can't hear you. You're breaking up.
So obviously, there are changes to this alternative. Oh, am I breaking up?
Yeah.
Can you? I'm just trying to look. There's my phone. Can you hear me at all?
We can hear you. That's a little better. Do you mind starting again, please? We missed the front bit.
Okay. So I'm happy to support the alternative, but obviously the alternative is going to need some changes. We need to look at condition 6, condition 14, and I think it's condition 20 that was spoken about the management plan. Other than that, everything else looks okay. So those are the conditions that I think we need to probably discuss.
Okay.
Otherwise, I support the recommendation.
Are you formally requesting an amendment to those at this point?
Yes, condition 6, revised acoustic report to be lodged for approval. I think we've already discussed the fact that we don't need to do that. We can say that oh gosh, I can't remember what we said.
So
something approved to the
if I may help out, I think we discussed deleting the first sentence and then amending the latter sentence to say that development is to comply with the recommendations and assumptions of the acoustic report, and the recommended works must be completed prior to the commencement of the use,
And maintained.
And maintained thereafter to the satisfaction of Wanneroo.
Presiding member, if I may, the city wanted us to reference the Gabriel Hearn Farrell November 24 report.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Huntley?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fantastic.
Yeah, before
Did you hear that? That's good.
Sorry, just give me a second.
There's no preamble, so you just need to make it clear. Same as refusal, but changing it.
Yeah. Councillor Huntley, are you happy with the wording suggested there?
Yes, that's good. I only had half of it written down, so yeah, that's fine.
All right, you know what I might do? I might deal with those amendments one by one before we then move on. What I do need to flag as well is there's no preamble to the recommendation for approval that the City of Wanneroo sent through. So there is some wording for a preamble. It's essentially instead of refuse, it is approved. So we just need to flag that we'll be adding in a preamble to that because they've just sent through conditions. They've not sent through the preamble. All right.
I'm happy to second the amendment.
Member Hyde is happy to second amending motion number 1, which deals with condition 6. Do you wish to speak to that?
Only that I concur with Councillor Huntley that I think we've now moved to a position where we have agreement on acoustic measures subject to those modifications being made to the fence, which now have adjacent owner approval. And I'm comfortable therefore that the recommendations of the acoustic report as approved can be implemented. I appreciate the addition of those words and maintained in perpetuity thereafter because I think it's very important for childcare centres. These approvals run with the land and not the operator, so it's important for the surrounding community to know that there is management of acoustic aspects.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak for or against this amendment to recommended condition 6? No? All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Back to you, Councillor Huntley. Do you wish to move any of those other amendments?
We are not asking them to construct a footpath. On a battery pack here, it's obviously not putting out enough power. So condition 14, are you catching that?
Yes.
Condition 14 is obviously the commencement of construction of a footpath. We're not going to do that. We're actually going to do line markings. So can someone help me out with how we word that?
I'm not sure, Councillor Huntley, that condition 14 deals with that at all. I think what you would be dealing with is a new condition. So condition 14.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you wish to move an amendment to include a new condition requiring delineation of a pedestrian route within and through the car park. Would you be satisfied with wording that reads, I think the city asked for an amended site plan. The city officers, are you still online?
Something along the lines of prior to commencement.
All right, because I do have words here. I know the city officers talked about an amended site plan, but alternatively, wording could read, prior to occupancy, line marking shall be installed within the car park to delineate a path of pedestrian access through the car park and linking the entrance to the surrounding path network. The line marking shall be installed and thereafter maintained to the satisfaction of the City of Wanneroo. Would that satisfy you, Councillor Huntley?
Yeah, really good.
Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Seconded, Member Hyde. Do you wish to speak to that amendment, Councillor Huntley?
I think that explains it well, so happy with that.
Thank you. Member Hyde, do you wish to speak?
I'm comfortable with that wording, presiding member. I think it is important, even though the car park may be quite small, but just to ensure that those vulnerable groups with pushchairs and toddlers in hand, etc., are aware of almost rights of way, and also it will flag that to traffic as well. So I think that line marking is important.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak for or against the amendment to include that new condition? All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Any other amending motions, Councillor Huntley? Sorry,
where that.
Could you start again, please?
Member Hyde was talking about a management plan. I'm not sure where that fits in here. I can't exactly see it. But I don't know whether Member Hyde can bring that up. But otherwise, I'm satisfied with it as is now.
Okay, thank you. I think Member Hyde does intend to move that alternate from the signals I'm getting. Is there anything else that you wish to raise, Councillor Huntley? No. All right. Member Hyde, seconded. You wish to speak.
Thank you, presiding member. I'm comfortable that we have reached a resolution on this matter, and thank the applicant for pursuing approvals as required for boundary fencing, etc. Noting that these things can get a bit tricky when we go through magistrates' courts and those sorts of things, and mindful of the city's local law, and I think we need to uphold those. I think generally speaking, the development is in keeping with the planning framework. It's obviously a use that we have some discretion over in this urban area, and it is an emerging urban area, and it might seem relatively quiet at the moment to some, but we need to allow for this type of development to service the local population. I've considered some of those variations and the relative impacts and strategies for mitigation, and I'm satisfied that safety matters such as bushfire and general vehicle movement and traffic can be satisfactorily dealt with. The design review was generally supportive of the form and the detail, but brought to our attention matters of pedestrian safety, which I think through the recent amendment we have adequately dealt with. And I think it is important that the issue of acoustics measures and mitigation strategies continue for the perpetuity of the development. I would like to propose an amending motion, please, which I think is amending motion 3, to include a new condition. The draft that I have would be prior to occupation, an operational management plan, including but not limited to the following information: staff parking management, operating hours and daily routine, landscape maintenance, noise management, waste management, to be approved and implemented to the satisfaction of the city.
Thank you for that. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Seconded, Member Coltaz. Do you wish to speak further to that?
It's not an unusual requirement, presiding member. I think, we do have 96 odd children and 16 staff here, and it does have a residential area around and residents moving in. I think this kind of thing doesn't need to be an onerous task. The ones I've looked at across the metropolitan area, relatively short and succinct. They pull together some of the key activities ongoing and just provide clarity to the actual approval about how those things would be managed. And I think then it just enables clarity and certainty both for the applicant and the surrounding community around how it will operate. So, thank you. Member Coltaz, do you want to speak to the amendment?
No, I think Member Hyde has covered it
Thank you.
succinctly.
Any other member wish to speak for or against the amendment to include an operational management plan? All right, all those in favour? Carried unanimously. Do you have anything you wish to add further as second?
No, I'm comfortable to leave that.
All right, does any other member wish to speak for or against the primary motion?
I'll just speak to it. I think the issues associated with access and parking have been thrashed out. The discretion that we've used to approve it has been appropriate. Design review panel gave it a tick. And I think the noise issue is one that we generally get raised during submissions, and whilst there wasn't a lot of submissions in this case, the fact that there are going to be a number of residents in the area in the future, including Councillor Huntley's daughter, perhaps the issue of acoustic implementation of the findings is a good idea. So that being the case, I'm supporting the application.
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak for or against? Councillor Huntley, I'm going to hand back to you to close in a minute. So I'm not going to hand back to you just at the minute. You get to close as mover. I might then speak briefly, and I really will focus on perhaps the issues that were raised by the community through the advertising process. So I think the use within the residential zone, it's been showed it does meet the objectives of the residential zone, and it'll provide a service to residents in the area. I think the impact of the centre will be minimised on adjoining neighbours because it's surrounded on three sides by roads. It achieves the setback requirements of the scheme. It's on the southern side of residential neighbours, so there won't be any overshadowing, and it largely takes the appearance of a well-designed residential development, so it will not unduly impact the residential character of the area either. The traffic impact assessment concludes there's more than enough capacity in the road network to accommodate traffic movements, and there's enough parking on site to cater for the development, and the City of Wanneroo agrees with the methodology and findings of this assessment. The amendments already supported by the panel will address the key issues, I think, that have been raised by the city, and so I think the application should be approved. Councillor Huntley, over to you now as mover to close if you so wish.
Thank you, presiding member. Yes, look, absolutely agree with what we've done, and especially amending some and putting some new conditions in. The only thing that I would really like, probably something to be considered, is obviously there is only one entrance in and out of this childcare centre, and that's obviously with Bourke Road. Bourke Road looks to be a funny little road. It bears around the corner and then into a cul-de-sac. So there's quite a few homes there. When you actually start to look at the mapping, you see how close these homes are together. So I think, unfortunately, if you have any friends come over the weekend, there is nowhere to park. So perhaps the childcare centre, as a token to the residents, could allow that gateway to be open unless there is severe graffiti or issues inside that car park, in which case the residents lose that ability to park in there. But I do think that would be quite nice, seeing as the childcare centre only runs Monday to Friday, that car parking be made available for local residents to use. So that's the only sort of comment I have about that. Other than that, I'm happy.
Thank you for that. We won't deal with that formally because that's not really a subject of the DA, but your sentiment and your request is noted. Thank you for that. We now move to making a decision on the recommendation for approval with the amended conditions that have already been dealt with. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you for that. Item 4, Form 2 DAP applications. There are nil. Item 5, Section 31, SAT reconsiderations for the City of Wanneroo nil. Part D, other business, SAT applications and Supreme Court appeals. All SAT applications for the DAP are listed on the DAP's website. With that, I close the meeting at 12:32 p.m. and I thank everybody for your attendance and your patience, and have a good day further.
It's